Hello and welcome to another episode of Spec Steppin. We are stepping through the web API spec alphabetically, and we're at Beacon API. So let's first go through what the Beacon API is, and then I'll jump to my code like I have in the past. So Beacon API is a way to send asynchronous non-blocking code between the client and the server. Now, typically, as you can probably see on your screen, is this has been used for analytics purposes. So in the past, before the Beacon API, so if you had an application that on which you wish to gather analytics, which is kind of crucial to making informed decisions, what you would do is you would send that information from the client to the server utilizing Ajax technology, XHR, fetch, sort of thing. Well, with the Beacon API, it allows you to do it easier because if you're doing Ajax, there was not a guarantee that you could get that back from them before, if it starts or they stop and leave your application, what have you. There was not a guarantee that would get back. So you couldn't trust your data if you did it that way. Now, the way around that before Beacon API came around is you would make the call synchronous. And so you would make sure that got through since it was not asynchronous. However, then you were taking a performance hit on your application, which is not good. So they came out with the Beacon API, which allows you to send that beacon information to where it needs to go on the server side. And let me just jump down to browser compatibility here. So as you can see, it's used in all modern browsers, so you can feel free to use this. Now, this is one of the few that does not have an example here, but they do have an interface the method what it send beacon takes and so on and so forth. So let's go ahead, let's dive into my code and I'll show you kind of how this works. So first of all, I needed a web page and to send this, so I have just a basic web page. Now, right here, all it does is I'm just doing stuff on the console, and I'll show you that in a second. Now, because the Beacon API communicates with a server, I needed a server. So what I did was I set up using Node, a Node server, just a simple Node server using Express. Pretty easy to set that up. And so I'm not going to spend a lot of time going on this, but just know that I have a route here, excuse me, where it's hitting analytics. Pardon me, need some coffee. I'm just hitting an analytics route, and all that's doing is I'm logging to the console, receive bacon data, and request body. And then I'm sending back that it's a good request, 200. Okay. So I'm logging this to console. And if you look down here, you can see that I have that going. So when I first started this to record this video, fired up the server and it said server running on port 3000, which comes from here. And then I have these four here when I was just making sure everything was working before recording. And it says received beacon data and request body. So the request body is the user ID, the event, and the timestamp of that event. So let me jump into my client side code to show you how in the world did this get here. So let's go ahead and jump into here. And if I look here at my client side code, first thing, just like in other videos, I've said this, and you'll hear me harp on this, always checking to make sure you have the ability to do that. Even though this is an API that's in all browsers, it's just a good practice to check and make sure that you have what you need in order to do what you need to do. So in this case, I'm making sure there's a navigator object and it has a send a beacon property. And if that's true, then what I'm doing is I'm creating a data object. So, what am I doing using a var? Um, sorry, old habits die hard. So I have let data equals, and I just have this object of the user ID. It's a click event, and I'm just grabbing the date now timestamp. So imagine, if you will, that you have different event listeners tied up and on different events on the page with which you want to gather data. Well, what you can do is you can, as a part of that, you can actually grab different events, different information from the page, values of different parts of your page, date timestamps, all that sort of stuff, put it in an object, and we can send it using the beacon to back to the server and perhaps store it in a database that we could then on the server side, maybe we could build an app that has a dashboard for executive view or something like that so we can see how our app's performing. and what's getting clicked on, all that sort of good stuff. So here I'm taking that data and I'm just stringifying it. And then here's where I'm actually where the magic happens, where I'm hitting this is the address of my local server. And there's that analytics route that I have, which is right here. So 3000 port analytics, and I'm passing the data string object to it. Now, if I go back to here, you can see that the method takes two objects, the URL, that's what I just showed you, and the data. And the data argument, it's optional, but why would you send anything without data? That's weird. But you can send a bunch of information through to it. So I just happen to be sending an object. And then I'm just console logging, hey, it was sent successfully. If there's an issue where the navigator send beacon do not exist, then it'll tell me it's not supported. So now I'm going to clear this window down here so we can start from scratch. And I just happen to have it open right here. And I'm going to clear my console and I'm just going to refresh because I have this set up to run as soon as the page loads. So here it's beacon request sent successfully, which is from my line 16, which is right here. And here is the server side console log that was sent that beacon request. So as soon as I loaded the page, it sent a request and it sent this data through to it. So hopefully that's helpful to you. It's pretty cool technology to be able to use and gather analytics and stuff. You could use it for other things, I imagine, too. But for other normal like API calls and stuff, I'd probably use Fetch. I wouldn't use Beacon because you want to get that data back for your application from a Fetch API. But this is definitely great for sending one-way like type data from your application back to a server. If you have any questions, let me know, and happy stepping.